Hola y bienvenidos a 10 minutos en la historia. Yo soy Erin y hoy hablaré sobre el arte que era creado durante la Revolución Mexicana en 1920.
Erin, what are you doing? This video is supposed to be in English.
I know, but I thought that maybe since it's about the Mexican Revolution, I could do the narration for this episode of 10 Minutes in History in Spanish. Okay, I mean, subtitles, kind of a thing.
If we want to engage the audience, let's try actually speaking their language, okay?
Está bien.
Let's try this again, shall we?
Hey, and welcome to 10 Minutes in History.
Also known as Erin can speak Spanish and Brie cannot.
También se llamado Erin puede hablar en español y Brie no puede hablarlo.
I'm Brie.
And I'm Erin.
And as we are certified official
Professional.
art experts,
PhD.
masters, etc., today we'll be discussing the art created during the Mexican Revolution.
After the reign of President Manuel Carranza ended in 1920, Álvaro Obregón, the rightful leader of the revolution and the bringer of the fall of Carranza, and Plutarco Elias Calles, who found no fortune in business but struck gold in revolution and government, dominated the country of Mexico. These two claimed themselves the rightful heirs to Madero's presidency. They declared they would use their power to bring about a desperately needed era of peace and reconstruction.
During the so-called violent period of the Mexican Revolution, which lasted from 1910 to 1920, the country was plagued with destruction. The railroads went bankrupt, as most of them were in complete ruin by the end of the war. Telegraph lines were obliterated. Mining and agricultural production diminished by a half. To make matters worse, the country had a debt of over $1 billion to foreign nations, most of whom demanded compensation for damages to their properties during the violent period. And Mexico had trouble paying this off because the military consumed a whopping 60% of the budget.
With such a financial emphasis on the military, there was a deficit in other important areas, one of them being education. The education budget tended to vary among leaders. Under the Porfiriato, the budget was around 7.2%, rising to 7.8% with Madero, and to 9.9% under Victoriano Huerta in 1913, when the Civil War began. It took a sharp decline, however, with the Carranza regime, tanking to around 0.09%.
When Obregón became president, he knew that education was a pivotal part of cultural reconstruction. He named
José Vasconcelos,
a prominent Mexican intellectual, as his Minister of Education. His overreaching goal was to bring education to the masses through developing systems of rural education and making art available to the general public. He did this by encouraging the painting of murals, or giant wall paintings, in public places.
The mural movement is widely attributed to the influence of the Escuela Nacional Preparatoria, or the National Preparatory School for those of you who only speak English. José Clemente Orozco y David Alfaro Siqueiros made their initial contributions to the movement. These prominent and influential artists were known as Los Tres Grandes, or the Big Three, as they shaped the forefront of artistic muralism in Mexico.
Rivera, arguably the most notable of the Big Three, was born in
Guanajuato, Mexico,
on the 8th of December 1886. He jump-started the
Sindicato de Pintores, Escultores y Grabadores Revolucionarios de México,
or the Syndicate of Revolutionary Painters, Sculptors, and Technical Workers of Mexico. The syndicate's goal was to create communal artwork designed to bring justice to the masses. It rejected traditional easel painting and instead favored monumental art in all its forms, because it is public property. The bigger, more public, and more radical the artwork, the better.
Some of his most famous works include Sueño de una tarde dominical en la Alameda Central, Agrarian Leader Zapata, Alliance of the Peasant and the Industrial Worker, Death of the Capitalist, and Detroit Industry, among others. Just as the other members of the Big Three did, Rivera infused his radical political beliefs into his works. He, along with his wife, Frida Kahlo, were wholehearted supporters of communism.
Rivera was also an advocate for the integration of traditional Mexican culture into modern society. Although critics reprimanded him for his supposed romanticizing of Mexico's indigenous past, the true Mexican masses were cooperative with the ideal. gladly trading their craft items for mass-produced goods. This integration helped realize
Vasconcelos'
dream of bringing education to the campesino. It did, however, pose an issue in that it upheld the idea of indigenous assimilation.
Another of the big three was José Clemente Orozco, the most complex of the Mexican muralists. Born in 1883 in Zapotlan el Grande, Mexico, Orozco attended Academy of San Carlos to study art. Orozco's work was largely political, with an emphasis on the theme of human suffering. Unlike Rivera, who glorified the Mexican Revolution, Orozco actually condemned it.
In his work, The Trinity, Orozco portrayed the revolution in a negative manner. The painting depicts a central figure of a revolutionary leader, who was threatening the very people for whom he was fighting. The leader was, according to Orozco, blinded by the red Jacobean hat of the revolution. The peasants, in extremis on either side of the painting, show the plight of the working class. In Orozco's opinion, they have been recruited to fight without knowing who or what for.
His earlier works created serious political conflict, forcing him to temporarily cease his work. Some of his conservative students would even try to destroy it. He returned to art in what is described as a new wave of social change in 1926. Some of his other works include The Trench, The Elements, Man in a Battle Against Nature, Christ Destroys His Cross, Destruction of the Old Order, and The Aristocrats.
The third of these big three was David Alfaro Siqueiros.
David Alfaro Siqueiros.
Right. He was born on 29th December in Camargo, Chihuahua, Mexico. He too attended the Academy of San Carlos. Siqueiros' work often featured social and political themes, much like that of the other members of the Big Three. He was undoubtedly the most violent of them, though, and his violence landed him in jail in 1930.
Siqueiros was heavily influenced by Spanish artist Francisco Goya, religious artworks, and the Italian principle of futurism, which glorified aggression and war and emphasized progress for the working masses. In his art, Siqueiros employed the use of dynamic perspective, dramatic use of shadow, and limited to monochrome color palettes.
It's no wonder that Siqueiros was influenced by artists around the world, since he was quite the international man. He spent time creating art in the US, fighting for the Republican Army in Spain, and ended up entangled in a plot to assassinate Leon Trotsky.
Siqueiros' most famous works include La humanidad del porfirismo a la revolución y el pueblo a la universidad. ¡Ja! Español!
In conclusion, 1924 to 1930 Mexico is a lot like Mexico in puberty. Like many preteens do, the country went through a bit of an identity crisis, going from the near dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz to a series of short-lived takeovers by figures such as Madero, Villa, Carranza, and Zapata. All of these were merely temporary phases of national power.
These leaders all tended to differ greatly in beliefs and platforms, which led to widespread ideological confusion and intensified Mexico's existential crisis of, who am I? Just as many teenagers may look for a sense of self in music, Mexico turned to art. While the three artists we mentioned, Rivera, Orozco, and Siqueiros, all had differing beliefs, they were all instrumental in forming Mexico's national identity.
Their work impacted and advocated for reform at the political, sociocultural, and educational levels. Mexico at this time was awkward, gangly, and above all confused. But thanks to the beauty of artwork, it began to mature into natural adulthood.
Bree, okay, now that we've wrapped that up, I have a question. Alright, so I have this idea, and you gotta hear me out. Okay, we do that episode again. Okay, yeah, we do it again. Okay, no, but with a twist. Entirely in Español.
No, that's Spanish for no.
Please.